Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday if you're in here with me live, happy Tuesday. Everybody in the chat. I'm glad I'm able to stream for another day this week. Knock on wood, I can keep it going for more days in a row. This topic has been on my mind for a while. Lincoln says, Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Eastern U.S. Eastern Standard Time, or standard, whatever. I'm Eastern Time in the U.S. So for me, it's actually 1 p.m. Um, but for those in the U.S. Central Time, welcome to noon. For everyone else, welcome to whatever time zones you have to be in. This has been on my mind for a while, and it got resurfaced yesterday. If you listen to my game recap stream, I was sort of making a joke on Coughlin's laws from the movie Cocktail, and I was talking about Todd's laws, and I rattled off a couple over the course of the stream. I think one of them was bad pennies always turn up. I think another one was hirelings are basically incompetent outside of their expertise, and they may not always be competent in their expertise, but outside of it, they're completely incompetent. And I think that I think another one was given enough time and space, the party will create their own big bad evil guys. I think those were the ones that I came up. Hey, Dave Mills, what's up? We got Dungeon Master Masterclass. Says, I'm looking forward to this. One of the campaigns I'm running now is my first. So I really thought about the theme of the campaign. Oh, great. Because the reason why I thought about this is it's like I said, it's been on my mind. And coming up with those laws or talking about those laws made me think about ways in which we, in our campaigns, do or do not think about what we really mean to say with them, which I don't think often comes up when we're talking about our campaign worlds, right? We talk about things like, is it fantasy? Is it high fantasy? Is it low fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Is it, is there a lot of magic? Is there a little magic? Is it gonzo? Is it very gritty? But we don't actually talk a lot about, with these worlds we make, sort of if we have anything we mean to say about them. And this is something that comes up, obviously, not just in game worlds, but it comes up in certainly when you're looking at media, if you're talking about literary criticism or film criticism. And I'm about to read from someone who was talking about theater and playwriting, this idea of what the author is trying to say with this creation of theirs. But it's not something that comes up a lot, right? Hey, Elfmate, welcome. We don't think about a lot. Well, what are we trying to say with our worlds? But I think it's a good thing to think about, because when we're trying to determine kind of how things are working in the world, and I call them themes. The guy Lajos Egri is going to talk about. He's going to call it premise. Premise might be the better word for it, but those things can inform sort of why things happen. Or if we have to choose between two options, let's say there's a equal amount of chance of two options. Yeah, sure, we can roll a die and just randomly take one, but we can also look at which one fulfills these kind of unwritten rules, right? If we think about the physical laws of our universes, right, generally physics based, at least up to our limit of whatever physics we know. And then we might think of the sort of meta laws, which is the mechanics of the game. Then there's another element, which is what really is our world about? Why would one thing happen with another? And that, I think, can come back to where we can get that kind of resonance from these, what I'm going to call themes, what he's going to call a premise. And these are things I think that can help us with those decisions, but I think they help in deepen the game, in that you are not just presenting just kind of this world where things happen just because of the dice, or for no reason, or just for whatever, right? If we're going to say in some aspect, things are happening for sort of story reasons, right? It's in some ways the theme is kind of, what is the story beneath all the stories? All kinds of things might happen in the world, but what is the really kind of the truth of our world beneath all of that? And how can we imbue our world with that kind of life? If I really believe something strongly, like one of my Todd's law, bad pennies always turn up, then how does that come through in the world? And when I see events happening and I need things, or I want to draw things in, or I'm looking for, how can I what do I need to do in this space, or what can I do in this space, or I need something, I can always go back to that law. Bad pennies always turn up. Okay, what bad pennies has the party left out there? They're going to start to rise back up in, on the surface. Hey, Terrence, welcome. Let's see. Nothing in chess is a great topic. I think you can have themes and setting and themes and individual campaigns in the setting. Yeah, you can layer this stuff, I think, as deeply as you want to. And setting and campaign are sometimes synonymous, sometimes they're not, right? Sometimes folks will have a single setting that comes as a bunch of campaigns. Sometimes there's just a setting for a particular campaign, and once the campaign is done, the setting is done. I tend to think of it in terms of setting because I go back to things like, Middle Earth, right? Middle Earth, whether you're reading the Silmarillion, whether you're reading the Lord of the Rings, whether you're reading the Hobbit, certain things, they resonate throughout all of those stories. Whoops, that just trying to get my head right off the top of the screen and showing off my microphone. There we go. See, that's a little bit better. Whether they are, whichever story they are in that universe, share certain themes, but certainly you can talk about themes within themes, right? Okay, you can, a certain campaign can definitely be about a certain aspect of a theme, or like I said, he's going to call a premise. Jack Hole says, are you talking about using the gaming space to explore real world themes? It gets complicated, right? So I'm not talking about necessarily trying to make a statement about something, though you certainly can. I'm not saying you have to make your world about politics or equality or whatever. What I'm talking about is more, I mean, they can be that if you want to, but no, I'm not saying that it has to be that. It can be anything you want. Like I said, if there's one, say, premise of my worlds, it's that, like I said before, bad pennies always turn up, right? If you do a really bad turn on somebody, that's going to come back. There's a consequence of that's going to come back. Whether that individual can do it, whether some other consequence of that will bubble up, but that you can't keep those things down forever, right? It will out. Now, that doesn't always happen in real life. I think we often want to think it does. We hope it does, right? We hope that you do something rotten, or the person who does something rotten, right? That it'll be, they'll get exposed, right? They'll be eaten alive by guilt, or someone will do a bad turn to them, or if worse comes to worst, if you're in a kind of the Judeo-Christian sort of religious belief system, then they will either have to be asked for forgiveness or suffer for it in the afterlife, whatever it may be, right? That's not a particularly political statement, but it's something that I like to have in my games, right? So it can be that, but it really can be whatever you want. Let me just read what I'm reading from, and I have this electronically somewhere, but I can't find it, so I'm just pulling up. This book is called The Art of Dramatic Writing by Lajos Egri. It's a classic guide to writing plays. I think it's originally published in the 1950s, something like that. No, even earlier than that. Or maybe, let's see. No, 1942 is what was originally date. And like I said, he calls this premise. So I'm just going to read a little bit of that. Let's see. Jack Cole says, okay, so themes like Lord of the Rings being about hope, heroism, overcoming evil. Yeah, and again, because I've been sort of on a Lord of the Rings kick, right? There's even other things like as I've been going through, listen to that podcast, and they're really going in depth about Lord of the Rings, things like the easy way never pans out, right? Often the Fellowship, whichever form you're taking at this point in the podcast, the hobbits have just gotten to Weathertop, but it's clear that in the choices that they make in their journey, if they took the easiest choice, it would have been the one that turns out the worst. When they end up taking the harder choices, or they make those decisions to take the difficult choices, and those tend to pan out better in the long term, even if not in the short term, in the long term, right? So that might be one. So you can have the very high level, hey, hope is everywhere, right? You can also have the lower levels of more subtle levels, like Tolkien will often talk about luck, but there's always a little bit of something where, is it luck, or is that Eru, Iluvatar, turning a die. So, it goes from a natural 1 fumble to a success, something like that, right? So is it luck, or is this where a divine force is stepping in? And so there, you could probably talk about a theme of, this kind of somewhat, divine intervention, or reliance on luck, or putting your, in a sense, your putting yourself at sort of in the not in the way of, but in the hands of sort of this kind of providential acts, right? Anything like that. So there's a lot of things. That's probably was a terrible explanation of what I was trying to say on that, but I think hopefully folks will kind of get what I'm trying to say about it. But so here we go. So here's what Mr. Egri had to say about it. So he calls this premise. A man sits in his workshop, busy with an invention of wheels and springs. You ask him what the gadget is, what it is meant to do. He looks at you confidingly and whispers, "I really don't know." Another man rushes down the street, panting for breath. You intercept him and ask where he's going. He gasps, "How should I know where I'm going? I'm on my way." Your reaction, and ours, and the world's, is that these two men are a little mad. Every sensible invention must have a purpose, every planned sprint a destination. Yet fantastic as it seems, the simple necessity has not made itself felt to any extent in the theater. Okay, so I'm going to skip over a little bit, but I think already from this, we can get the sense of, he's talking about writing plays, right? Folks just running around doing things kind of to do them. Much like, I always think of Wayne's World 2, where they have the guys carrying the pane of glass across the street, just waiting for the car to run through it. They don't really have a purpose, but they're there. And I'm sure we've done this ourselves as game masters. I'm sure we've seen in games where stuff is just seemingly to happen because there's a moment, or they just need something to happen, so it's happening without really any thought of, wait, why is it happening, right? Like we often think about in oftentimes with the very big bad evil guys, we want to destroy the world. Well, what is destroying the world going to get you, right? Like what does destroying the world do? Like, and again, getting back to the central business, what does that say about us? What does that say about you in this world, that you have someone who just wants to destroy it just to destroy it, right? Juan Cholo, hey Juan Cholo. Other themes could be law versus chaos, or civilization versus savagery. Yeah, you can definitely get into those, right? Like, or even kind of, what does it mean to be civilized? Depending on, what does it mean? One person savage, right? At this point, savagery is probably not even a great term to use, right? But what does it mean to be civilized? Who's civilized? Who's not? There's look, there's going to be unlimited themes with unlimited sort of angles on which to look at them. But getting back to Mr. Egri here, he says, everything has a purpose or premise. Every second of our life has its own premise, whether or not we are conscious of it at the time. That premise may be as simple as breathing or as complex as a vital emotional decision, but it is always there. We may not succeed in proving each tiny premise, but that in no way alters the fact that there was one we meant to prove. Our attempt to cross the room may be impeded by an unobserved footstool, but our premise exists nonetheless. The premise of each second contributes to the premise of the minute of which it is part, just as each minute gives its bit of life to the hour and the hour to the day. So at the end, there's a premise for every life. And then he quotes Webster's International Dictionary that defines a premise as a proposition antecedently supposed or proved, a basis of argument, a proposition stated or assumed as leading to a conclusion. And what he's getting at here is that everything has a purpose, right? Everything you're doing things for a purpose. So, as Terrence says, I'm going to destroy the world and put up endless condos. Well, at least that's a purpose, right? That would be something that we might ask, what are those condos meant to do? We could get into sort of character motivations versus, other motivations, but, doing things for a purpose. But even beyond our particular villains, right? What is this world trying to say? And he's going to get into a bunch of examples. I'm just going to quote kind of a few of them. But first, let me finish out what he says here. So he chooses the word premise to talk about this. I'm calling it theme. Premise might actually be better because themes get awfully broad, but I called it themes in my title and I didn't think about changing it till after I'd already done it. So we've got themes, but maybe premise is a better word. We choose premise because it contains all the elements that other words try to express and because it is less subject to misinterpretation. And he talks about some different playwrights, referring to premises by other words, but he's going to get into some examples, right? And he's going to start with Romeo and Juliet, and I'll read this one because I think most folks have somewhat at least a passing knowledge of Romeo and Juliet. The play starts with a deadly feud between two families, the Capulets and the Montagues. The Montagues have a son, Romeo, and the Capulets a daughter, Juliet. The youngsters' love for one another is so great that they forget the traditional hate between their two families. Juliet's parents tried to force her to marry Count Paris, and unwilling to do this, she goes to the good friar, her friend, for advice. He tells her to take a strong sleeping draught on the eve of her wedding, which will make her seemingly dead for 42 hours. Juliet follows his advice. Everyone thinks her dead. This starts the onrushing tragedy for the two lovers. Romeo, believing Juliet is really dead, drinks poison and dies beside her. When Juliet awakens and finds Romeo dead, without hesitation, she decides to unite with him in death. This play obviously deals with love, but there are many kinds of love. No doubt this was a great love, since the two lovers not only defied family tradition and hate, but threw away life to unite in death. The premise then, as we see it, is great love defies even death. So he would say of Romeo and Juliet, right? Great love defies even death. And in a sense, what he's going to get to further on, what we're not going to cover, is that writing the play, you would have this premise, and you would say, I believe as the author that great love defies even death. So I want to prove that out in this play. So I'm going to write this play trying to prove to you, the audience, that great love defies even death. And if I am successful in that, then at the end of the play, you will agree with me that great love defies even death, right? That's kind of the point. Well, that's a play, right? And we're talking about living worlds and role-playing games. But I think a similar logic can come in. We can challenge ourselves as in the authorial aspect of being a dungeon master. And goodness knows a lot of dungeon masters get into dungeon mastering because they have great, they pride themselves on being authors, or they see that as almost a prerequisite of GMing. And I disagree with that, but that doesn't stop the fact that plenty of folks step into the chair because they have wonderful stories to tell. That we could look at our campaigns and our world similarly, right? What are we trying to ask ourselves of and the party and our players, right, to explore? What statements could we make about our world that part of the setting, and as I forget who in the chat talked about, on a campaign level or a setting level, that we're trying to see whether this is going to hold up or not, right? I usually play good campaigns, and you could probably do the same thing, flipping these things on their head for evil campaigns. But I usually think of these kind of statements as far as good statements, right? So I talk about bad pennies always turning up. I'm really talking about that you can't escape bad acts, right? They will come back to kind of pay back what's been done. But if I was playing an evil campaign, maybe I'd have to flip all that on its head somehow, right? I don't know, maybe good acts will mess you up. I don't know. The sort of inverses of these don't seem that compelling to me, but maybe that's just why I'm drawn to running good campaigns as opposed to evil ones. But if I feel like that is something that I think is important to me, maybe it's a philosophical statement, then I might say that, yeah, hey, in this campaign, in this world, if you do acts of evil, they're going to pay you back. And over the course of that campaign, we could see whether that is true. Now, of course, I can, as the GM, if I so choose, I could put my thumb on the scale in a way that's not fair to make sure they get payback, right? In my own game, they kidnapped an NPC. That NPC escaped. Sure, I can have the NPC show up as a king with an army, whatever, but that would be, that'd be cheating. And I don't mean for this to be, so the GM can cheat to make his point across. No, but I can put this stuff, in play, right? And in doing so, it shapes the kinds of decisions that I make, which in turn, to me, leads to a game that's going to feel very interconnected. They left this guy out there, and this guy didn't just vanish off the page because that moment was done, right? Okay, that scene ended, the party moved on, so now he's gone, right? And on to better other things. No, that guy's still out there. And the party is, if they were not aware that such things might come back to affect them, they're aware now. So as a GM, it makes me want to keep track of these things. It makes me want to keep that ledger of characters. And it gives even this minor character more of an import in the game. You can't just you think this guy's a random encounter, so you decide to just play with them as a toy and then screw them over and toss them in a garbage bin, well, it's just a random encounter. What difference is it going to make? Well, it might make quite a difference, because I'm telling you, that guy that you screw over, he's coming back, and I'm going to keep track of it. As Dave Mills says, you reap what you sow, right? That could be the premise, right? That could be the theme, or one of the themes, right? You're going to reap what you're going to sow. I mean, which we think about oftentimes as being, I feel like that, right? We talk about consequences all the time. But then I also will go on to Facebook and Reddit and different places and read about GMs struggling with the concept of consequences and trying to figure out what to do. So maybe having them write this down, write down a few of these premises or themes, whatever you want to call it, right? And putting that on a note card above their laptop or on their GM screen, saying, here are the things that are really important about my campaign. These are kind of the messages underneath the messages that I have is, you reap what you're going to sow. If you do well is going to come back to you. If you do horrible, murder hobo-y things, then guess what? The results of those murder hobo-y things are going to find you. And just from a content perspective, I think it really will help shape things in a way that will be resonant for your players. I've played games where we've just gone on through just series of events, and sure, there's some kind of plot that we're ongoing and something behind us, but none of these moments really mean anything because there's no impact to them outside the world. And part of this, sure, is just consequences. But another part is, well, how can we make them impactful? How can we give them meaning? And having them tie in to some philosophical thing that we're trying to say will help us imbue these moments, I think, with more life and more impact. I have a feeling my players aren't going to look at the next guy they just happen to bump into on the road or in the wilderness as just some guy. Now, like I said on the other chat, I don't know whether they're going to take the correct lesson and just be nice and not try to jam people over. Sorry, I got a truck backing up outside. It's the Prime delivery truck, and I didn't even order anything, but he's backing up, and his backup sound is making a terrible noise. You guys might not be able to hear it, but I can hear it, and it's bugging the heck out of me. It gives me this ammunition, and he's got a bunch of them, right? So let me read some of these other ones, because I don't want to just seem like... So he talks about King Lear, right? Blind trust leads to destruction. I think that's a premise or a theme that I think would be very appealing to a number of games, right? A number of situations, a number of circumstances, number of campaigns, right? As you remember, that King Lear, he had the daughters, and he chooses the wrong ones to trust and alienates the one that he should have trusted, right? And so he trusted blindly, and it led to destruction. Macbeth, he mentions ruthless ambition leads to its own destruction. That could be another one that I think would be very, very applicable to lots and lots of groups. Othello, jealousy destroys itself and the object of its love. There are many of these. And by the way, these also are really helpful when you're trying to figure out your bad guys, right? When you're thinking about what are your bad guys like, what are they after, and how do we characterize them? I think we often, I don't know if often, but a lot of times the bad guys end up in the Sauron mold. And if you read all the stuff in Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, Sauron makes a little bit more sense. We call him his, I guess it takes on a male persona, but really it's an it. It has a much different perspective about the world, and certainly as does Morgoth, than just anything within the world, right? Because fundamentally, he's not from Middle-earth. He doesn't really care about Middle-earth of itself, right? They were all outside it and kind of came in to take part in it, but particularly the ones that went bad, right? Their relationship to things is much different than, say, Lex Luthor or something who is of Earth and everything, right? And everything about Earth. But too often we don't think about what's driving, what's driving these bad guys. What is that character, not a flaw? What characters and why? Like, okay, they want to destroy the world, they want to destroy themselves. Like, why? Let's delve into that a little bit deeper. Is it something like you think about Othello, that jealousy destroys itself and the object of its love. Like we just took that up. We said, okay, we're going to take this particular theme, take this premise, and this is what we're going to write next to our bad guy. We're going to make a bad guy, and we're going to talk about jealousy and what it's doing, perhaps what it's done, which is kind of like what that Dark Lord stuff from that Von Richten's guide is sort of getting into, like what has caused these guys to be, or beings, creatures to sort of be the way they are. Going back to Tolkien, he talks about the ring wraiths, how the ring wraiths, not the ring wraiths, sorry, the whites and the barrow downs, but I think it applies to the ring wraiths too. They kind of like they had life, they sort of hate life, but they also they kind of want it and they hate it, and they have this relationship with it where they can't have it, so they want to destroy it. So if we think of these things and saying, okay, I have this premise about how jealousy is going to destroy everything. Well, maybe that's going to be the genesis of why is this bad guy doing the things he does? Why is the evil queen Bavmorda trying to put the world into a darkness, right? Well, often we just settle for, they're just doing it to do it. I don't know. We need an enemy, and Queen Bavmorda is trying to do it. But let's get in there deeper. Let's think about, what are we trying to say about the world? What are we trying to say about this person? How can the heroes be? How can our heroes either be the instrument of our premise, or we could see if they will be, because maybe they will end up being turned. Maybe you'll get a campaign and the party gets split, and the party doesn't. The party ends up helping Bavmorda and embraces being in a second darkness. Well, that says something. That says something too. Let's see. Dave Mills says they don't have to be bad guys. Good guys with opposing goals is fun too. Yes. Certainly you can have good guys with opposing goals. And of course, all the bad guys generally feel like they are the good guys of their own story, right? They're the heroes of their own tale. It's just that we don't, their point of view is just twisted or, opposite of ours, right? Thanos doesn't think he's a villain. Thanos thinks he's doing something heroic, but because of his point of view, it's been twisted into him doing something horribly bad. Right. So, think about, what are these core, this is super in the bones kind of stuff, right? What is animating the world? If you are someone who builds worlds because you feel like you have an authorial talent or something you want to explore, instead of putting all that stuff into the kind of narrative, think about how you could pull that stuff into all the baseline. How does this affect all these different creatures? And like, if a certain kingdom is powerful and it's evil, like, what is that saying about your world? And how can the party, you can really use it to develop the whole in a way that we talk about the premise of the campaign, right? The party's trying to overthrow evil, sure, but what else is that saying, right? How, if this person is someone who is trying to be jealous and control everything, the party then becomes maybe this thing is, can the party prove out this thing? If we're saying that it's wrong, that say one people subjugate, or one, a whole world is subjugated to one creature, and that's obviously something that's terribly wrong, then the party becomes this kind of weapon in a way to prove against it or not. How can the party succeed, right? How can the party prove out our premise, our theme of you can't or shouldn't, no world should be subjected to one creature. So I think that it's, getting back a little bit to the core part of this is this concept of thinking below the sort of artifice, right? Of getting a little bit deeper down into things. It's easy to set up a bunch of situations that more or less seem cool, right? Wow, that's neat. It's fun. But when we're looking at how do we want to make it more, and maybe that doesn't occur to everybody, and I tend to think about it, how can we make this? What separates this from the next thing, right? Am I just making situations which, like he talks about, guys running down the street, and when you ask them why they're running, they don't know why, they're just running, right? Or the guy who's building a large contraption, but they're just building it, right? Like, look for the more. Let's see. Dave Mills says a world subjected to one creature could cause world peace. It could. That could be You could even have, that could be your premise, right? Would one hand, a whole world behind one, listening to one voice, would that be world peace? I think a lot of people might say either that the price is too high for that, or that kind of, however that would come out, wouldn't work. But to me, a world that has that kind of interesting idea beneath it is much more compelling than a world that doesn't. And I think that's why I always, and again, I haven't read much. I've only seen the story, the series. I tried to read the first book. I couldn't get into it. Maybe I should try it again. But the whole, Game of Thrones world doesn't resonate with me as much as Tolkien's world, even though in some ways it's a lot more realistic. I mean, it's not trying to be mythical as much as kind of the game of Tolkien is, right? They're working in sort of in the blood and guts and day to day of these world. But I felt like there wasn't anything, right? It didn't feel to me like there was an idea, capital I, that was moving below the series. Maybe George R. R. Martin has them, and again, it could just be the show that just doesn't surface his ideas well enough. I'm not trying to say that he has no ideas, but I think when you have these things, I feel like that's why certain things resonate. I think one reason that kind of Lovecraft's work, even though the man is fairly abhorrent, or not even fairly, is a terrible human being, he was trying to say things in his work. Now, take out the racist thing, because there are let's remove the racist things. I'm talking specifically about the cosmic horror kind of things, that the universe is this horrific, maddened place, and basically the best we can do is try not to be destroyed, right? It's almost like, can we, maybe to put it in sort of the question, like there is no way, maybe the premise of almost all his work, or all his work, would be that you cannot look into the greater universe without being destroyed by it, right? That is the premise. I think that would apply to probably everything he's written. Juan Cholo says, what if the big bad guy wants to destroy the world because he sees the world as flawed and cruel? He wants to rebuild the world as a utopia where he will force everyone to be good, or else. I mean, I think we're getting into good territory here, right? I think that if we had sort of a rogue god or divinity or some creature with enough power to attempt to do that, we could talk about that. Is that a good thing? And then depending on where you want it, let's say, well, let's just take that as, okay, here's our bad guy and this is what he wants to do. And we're going to talk about, this is our premise, right? That you can't fix the world as is. Like the world can only be saved by destroying it. Maybe that's the premise, right? So we could kind of try to run that through. That could be the campaign. Let's run through that premise. And then we could see, well, where do the players come out on that? And maybe we even get to the part that it comes out on the other side, right? And then what has happened, what can happen if you then destroy the world and you get a chance to recreate it, right? And whose image are you recreating it? Will that image stay true? Can you, what would that mean for free will, right? Could you do this without free will? Like there's a lot of interesting ideas there, but at least there's an idea. And I think the idea is powerful, and the idea can be that animating spirit that we need. If we need to think about, well, why would our bad guy do this? I think we often think about that in films and the media, not even just about bad guys, right? Any character. Why is that character doing that? Why has the character been put in this particular position? And sometimes it's character motivations, and other times, right, it's the theme in Romeo and Juliet. Right, the solution to her problem, what the guy gave her, was take the sleeping pill, you'll pretend to be dead, whatever. Well, that's just one solution of probably a million different things that he could have told her to do, that she could have been counseled to do. Why that one? Well, that's the one that puts the spotlight on the premise, that brings it back to this core thing, because now you put in a situation where if Romeo thinks she's dead, if we're saying that love conquers all, what will he do? Same thing with our game. When our bad guys or other NPCs can do anything in the world, and there's really nothing to say, I couldn't even build a random table large enough to control or to simulate what all these different people could do. If I need something to narrow it down, right? If I need something to help me put a focus on what should happen in this moment, I can look to that theme. I can look at that premise. In my case, in my last game session, I was looking back at this NPC who the party had wronged. And if I could think about where in the world could he go, He could have gone anywhere. He had all the cardinal directions. He could have sat in a cave. He could have taken a boat ride down the river. He could have faded off into nothing, into just memory. He could have gone off in the woods to get killed. But none of those things are really okay. Yeah, I could have done them, right? I could have done like the Pine Barrens. He just runs from the Sopranos, just runs off, and then he's gone. Sure. But instead, looking at this premise I have is like, you're going to turn back up in the game. And I didn't have to do it now. I could have done it later, but I felt like I had a good opening now. I'm like, no, he's going to come back. He's going to come back to town, right? He's going to make himself known, and, you know, things are going to move to kind of put what the party did back in the spotlight, because that is kind of part of what my world is about. You do bad things, and those consequences are going to haunt you. So they are being, you know, haunted by them. So that's what happened, right? So it gives you this way of looking at it and saying, if you have all the choices in the world, which as GMs we tend to have, what can we do? What are the best decisions for our world? These premises can be a way to kind of focus you. Okay, our this is our goal, or this is what I'm trying to say. I can keep focused on what I'm trying to say. Hey, Radek G, hello, how are you? Thanks for joining the chat. But I really like what you guys are talking about in the chat. I mean, I think it's really fascinating to be able to break down some, you know, different things to see what fits. Terrence, party F's around, party finds out. Yeah, pretty much, right? Right. That's a perfectly fine premise. I also like the one, which again is just from that Tolkien podcast was listened to, is really the idea that the easy ways don't work out, which I think is something that comes up a lot just from a practical standpoint. Is GMs are fairly often asking about how to get their parties to think more outside the box, or to do things a little bit differently, or not just run up to the front door of every castle. But the problem is that if running to the front door of every castle and hitting it just in the mouth, punching things in the mouth, running up to the front door, doing all this stuff, and it always works, then they're always going to do it. And it makes sense. But if it's your theme, it's like, you gotta, like, the hard ways pay off, right? That's one of our, let's say it's one of our premises, right? Taking the hard way pays off. You take the hard way, and even though it might not look good in the moment, it's going to tend to pay off for you. In you know, in Fellowship of the Ring, it turned, you know, like if they had Frodo and gang leave the Shire and they take the easy way, which is the road, they run into the ring wraiths 5 minutes later, and Frodo's captured, the ring's gone, right? They go into the woods, they end up being lost, they end up almost getting choked by a willow tree, but they end up at Tom Bombadil's house, and they end up being sent forward and kind of pushed on their way. They took the harder road. The harder road ends up paying off, right? That is a premise, or that is a theme. And we could do the same things in our game. Those things are very easy to do, and they don't just have a payoff. You know, if you feel like, hey, I'm getting a little bit too esoteric with philosophical, you know, the players are going to find a lot of philosophical joy in our, you know, whatever depth in our games. The fact is that there are practical benefits as well. If you adopt these kind of premises, you do get to kind of slant the world towards it. Yeah, the front doors are always going to be the toughest, and that's the way it is, right? And one of my friends, when I played in his game, one of his long running rules was basically the person who gets to a kind of chest or some other kind of loot first gets the best, or at least first dibs on what they get, which isn't just a practical thing of, sure, you open the box and you get it, right? But if you open the box and everybody jumps in there, you're still going to get first pick. You're going to get the best piece. Usually it was just like the best piece, because it was a way of saying he's rewarding the daring of, you're the guy that took on the trap when nobody knew, right? You're the person that opened that door when it could have been had a guy with a gun behind it, whatever it is. Your character took that risk when everyone else was waiting behind you, so your character gets the best reward. And that is also, you know, a theme. Like, he who dares wins, right? You dare, you win. You don't dare, you don't get anything. And that was kind of a theme, right? And so it became important in that game. It definitely became a running a tactic or something valuable to think about, when should I take the lead, or let me take the lead so that I can be in that spot, or do I play it safe knowing that I'm going to get not the best, right? It was that kind of risk reward thing that I always love. But but that's a theme. And folks have already talked about all kinds of themes in there. I think premise is probably better. I have to say, right? Premise is better, I think, than what I'm calling theme. And again, Lajos Egri in The Art of Dramatic Writing calls premise, because premise is more specific, right? It's where you're sort of asking a really specific question with specific parameters. But I think in we can kind of work more generally, because I think one thing is in a play, you're talking about kind of one theme. I think in a campaign, especially if it's sort of a sandbox campaign where there might not just be one thrust to things, we might want to think about there could be multiple things going on, right? So, like I said, in Lord of the Rings, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sort of premises or themes that he has going on. We might have a bunch of different of these premises or themes running around in our brains and not just being so concentrated on one. Now, if you're running a more narrative campaign, maybe you would say that this particular narrative, we're talking about this kind of specific issue. And the fun thing is you get to test this out with a party. If you're writing a story, you're essentially writing out your proof as you go, right? Shakespeare writes Romeo and Juliet to basically prove this out, but he knows all the variables. He can have people, he's only limited by what he may feel like is realistic for them to do. The great thing with being a referee or a game master or a dungeon master is that we have these wonderful variables, which are the players, and how they're going to respond, how they're going to feel like their characters are going to respond, is going to add a whole new way to kind of interact with these sort of themes, because they're in it. And we can even see, like, is my party going to pick up on the right lesson about that guy? Or are they going to keep messing around or doing that? Is it going to take something else for them to wake up? Are they ever going to wake up? Are they just always going to, it's never going to be something strong enough to deter them, in which case maybe then my premise would lose, right? Because I would get to the end of this thing and think, wow, them always, the party F's around and never finds out, then that says something to me, right? And I think a lot of us, and maybe this is especially for sandbox GMs, this idea the world is kind of impartial to things. And I don't necessarily think that has to be the case. In fact, I would say it isn't the case. I mean, our world almost always contains some kind of deities, creative forces, destructive forces, either on the passively or actively, right, shaping the world. The world does not have to be impassive to these, whatever these basic principles are. We normally, especially in the OSR sense, think of chaos and law, whether they are just super abstract, just teams that are playing on such a scale that doesn't make sense to anybody. It would just, they're Lovecraftian in the sense that to look in either direction and actually see the truth of the conflict would just destroy your minds and explode them. Or if they're more, on the good evil spectrum with chaos and law. But we can think about, well, chaos and law are certainly principles of our universe, assuming you have them. If you have something else, then those would be those. But then we could also have these premises or themes that are also in that fabric. And how do they interact? Maybe when you create these situations where you upset or you go against or you test one of these principles, then that is an opening for chaos. Certainly, the NPC in my game is going to cause chaos. He's gonna take a situation that's fairly ordered, and he is gonna go in there and mess it up. He's gonna shake up the box a bit, right? The party's gonna have to come in and then theoretically restore order or succumb in some way to the chaos. So that's something that's I can see how the world may work. Terrence is back with some Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett, lots to say about the forces of narrative. Discworld really shaped the way I run games. Yes, I haven't read enough. I mean, I've read some Discworld, but maybe not enough of it. But I think it's definitely something to think about, even if we're not running incredibly narrative-driven games, right? Because my game's a sandbox game, and I didn't really. Maybe I should make a whole video about this. I think I made like a little short video I posted on Twitter when I talked about kind of sandbox versus narrative games, and that a sandbox game can have lots of narrative games in it, but it's overall, if you zoom out enough, it's kind of, you see the sandbox more than you see a single arc, whereas an Whereas if we were to flip it over to a narrative game, there are lots of elements of a narrative that can be open world sandbox. But if you zoom up enough, you see that overall, narrative. So even if in a sandbox game doesn't mean you're necessarily free of narratives. My point usually about sandbox gaming is just that the narratives are less sticky, right? You're not trying to stick to one. You're more free to branch out or jump branches or leave a particular narrative tree behind entirely, but the narratives are there. And so you can have forces of narrative inside a sandbox campaign. They're just not, or I guess I would say in my conception, they're just not the supreme forces. Whereas in a narrative campaign, you can have lots of open areas where maybe the forces of narratives weakens. But when you look at what is the supreme guiding hand, it's those narrative forces. But when we talk about, well, what's guiding these narrative forces, then we can look at these premises or these themes as the part of that engine, the fuel that's pushing the engine of these worlds. And like I said, you can look at it really as a guiding hand when you have the whole world to think about. And this seems to come up. I see it a lot. And, and it happens. I mean, I think it happens for everybody, right? You're trying to figure out what particular forces do in particular times and areas, and you don't have anything. These sorts of themes, these premises could be the things that draw you. If like we talked about Othello, right? If our big bad evil guy is his animating principle is this theme of jealousy destroys itself in the object of his love, and that's what he's doing, right? He hasn't destroyed himself yet. That's kind of for the party to prove to do, but he is destroying everything and destroying the object of his love. Maybe we're talking a big bad evil guy and not a very intimate story about sort of, a man and his partner and best friend. We're talking, so maybe a particular ruler loves his kingdom, but some jealousy of something is leading him to destroy his kingdom, or that's in the process of what he's doing. Then that gives us that can anchor a lot of decisions. If we have to think about, well, why are certain things happening? Or why is this guy doing this instead of that? It's because one of them works towards that premise, that principle. One of them doesn't. So go for the one that's, working towards this proof of your principle. Bob Mostel does Stradfellow. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's exactly it. And I think that part of what drew me. So, if you haven't seen it, I did not even a review. I just did a little video saying, like, I really liked a lot of the stuff Von Richten's guide as far as creating these dark lords like Strahd and these dark domains. And this was a lot of what it was about, right? Because it surfaces in a mechanical way these kinds of character ideas, these sort of what has made this creature the way it is. And the neat thing I liked about the dark domains is that it's like the domain, much like what we see, right, when in a movie or in fiction, or in any sort of play, whatever, right? When a character's feeling down and it's raining outside, right? The world takes on, sort of reflects the emotions of the protagonist. In a sense, these dark lords are these protagonists, and these domains are these parts of the world, or they're their own worlds that have taken on the character of the Dark Lord, and they get into, what forces are manipulating this so that it happens. But the fact is that it's happening. So when we look at, well, why is this person doing that? Why is their domain become like this? Why has this person's kingdom taken on this particular character? It's because he's got this principle that is driving him or her or it that we're trying to prove out. And then it becomes, can the party stop it, right? That becomes a campaign. And the other thing is because it adds more. If we have it okay, let's take it this way. Let me step back for a second. We've got a ruler, right? A big bad evil guy. We'll call it was Strahd as an example, though it's not Strahd, right? I know that Strahd, it has Irina is kind of trapped in there, and he can she's trapped there, but he can't ever have her. I'm trying to remember the exact specifics, and I don't know it, right? What ends up happening is you can have, if there's nothing of that, if it's just Strahd who's just brooding in his fortress in Barovia, which is kind of like, even though they have the trappings of sort of Gothic romance or doomed romance in, say, the original Ravenloft campaign or the module, the party's just going through to destroy Strahd, right? You're marching through there. You meet some characters. You'll meet Irina potentially. I don't even know if you don't even really have to. I don't think, but whatever. You'll get some tidbits about this. But essentially, you're on a one-way march. You know the way out is to destroy Strahd. If we know instead that Strahd is driven by this concept of jealousy, and that the jealousy, through this jealousy, is going to lead Strahd to destroy himself and destroy Irina, whom he loves, then when the party gets to Strahd, if they can suss this out, they have infinitely more angles to defeating this than simply killing Strahd. And then, in fact, killing Strahd would certainly bring this prophetic theme, this premise true, because jealousy would have destroyed itself. At the same time, maybe there's something else where the party can somehow try to diffuse this jealousy. How? I don't know. Maybe there's a few things. Maybe they could save Irina, right? Maybe the goal of the campaign becomes not we have to destroy Strahd to free Barovia. It's we have to free Irina from Barovia, which will free Strahd, because Strahd is in this endless cycle of loving and destroying Irina. One way to end the cycle, one which would not rehabilitate Strahd in any way, would just remove him, is just to kill Strahd. Another way that might help him see the truth. Maybe Strahd already knows the truth. He just is stuck, right? Like you see those moments where someone, they can't wrap their minds around doing it another way. It's too late for them, right? They're stuck. If you take Irina out of the puzzle, maybe that opens something up, that he knows that she has exited this loop, and then maybe he'll die. Maybe something else will happen, but maybe that death will actually free him from this kind of cycle, in the sense of the dark domain kind of element. When I saw on Facebook, and there was a good post where someone's talking about what happens, or no, it was Reddit, and I covered it on the last Reddit chat, talking about what happens if you just kill someone in the dark domain. And somebody pointed out, I think our own None Nothing might have pointed this out as well, is maybe the PC becomes the new Dark Lord, right? So if they just kill Strahd, they've just maybe replaced one Dark Lord with another themselves. If they free Irina, maybe the dark domain dissipates and nobody becomes a new Dark Lord, because Strahd is able to give up the mantle, pass on to another plane, let his spirit go, whatever it happens to be. How do we get to that point? Well, we have to have some idea, some knowledge of what is driving the whole situation, what is driving this campaign. It's not just a bad guy in a castle waiting to be killed with the minimum required backstory to make him a villain and give the party something to do. It's no, there's something deeper than that, right? Why is he doing that? What is this thing that this is all about? And when you when you have that in your mind as the dungeon master, and you put it into the world, the players can then pick this up, and they can start to see things in a more three-dimensional way. I think your NPCs will be more three-dimensional when they're not just mean to be mean or nice to be nice, but they have these things guiding them, and it makes sense because it's going to fit together. Terrence says, New Vegas 100 persuasion ending. I'm not familiar with New Vegas, but I believe it. And it'd be funny not to sidetrack, but this is probably not the thing that I would put on a particular persuasion roll. They would have to do something. They would have to figure that out. And it might be interesting if you were to look up, go to pull out the old Ravenloft manual again, but do it where the solution is not going to the castle and killing, or at least if you want the A+ solution, right? Maybe you talk about what are they, Final Fantasy Tactics in those games where they would grade your ending. Like you got the E ending would be the best, and there'd be, I don't know, A, B, C, I don't know, whatever it is, but you could talk about, going in and just killing Strahd is like the B ending, but it's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it, the hardest one, or the one that's most complete, would be to able to free Irina. I don't know how you would do it, but that would be the way to do it. I don't know if I have too much more to say about this in this particular moment. I hope maybe I made a little bit of a case of maybe why to inject some kind of deeper thinking into some of our things, I don't think it can hurt. I mean, it adds more work in the sense you're more brain work to it, right? Because you got to think a little bit more than just guys here just doing evil stuff to be evil. And look, there's nothing, ultimately, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? I think there's nothing wrong with having a more surface game where you're just having fun with good guys doing good things, evil guys doing evil things, right? I'm not trying to say that those games are somehow not worth having or lesser, but I think if you find that you've done that and you're looking for ways to take it up a notch, if you're maybe wondering, how do I get my players to invest a little bit more, start thinking in these kinds of terms, because I think once you start thinking in those terms, they will work their way into your game. And I think you might be surprised that your party might start picking up on them. They may not know, like, well, this is a theme of the game, right? I mean, it was made very clear in my friend's game that, hey, you're the first guy to the treasure chest, you get the best piece of loot. That was just something that was kind of a rule. You don't necessarily, I don't think you have to do that. And I think part of the fun is having your party discover these things. But I think you could also, as Bob Mossel suggests, good session zero material, right, is talk about this. I think there's some fun to letting them trying to figure this out on their own, right? Let them give them something to ponder as they start seeing things happening. Because, after a while, they're going to be putting their sessions together in their head. They're kind of going to be building the sort of mind map about how things work. And I think they'll start to make those connections. But I think when they're looking at why are characters doing certain things, why are certain motivations the way they are, why are certain things happening, we might not think about, well, this is the theme of the game, but we're going to think about someone like Strahd and say, like, okay, yeah, he is motivated by jealousy, right? And he's doing these things for jealousy. So the situation, the character, we're going to be able to see that he is destroying the very thing that he loves. And then maybe that will come up in other areas, and then we'll see how all these different things key together, right? If we look at, say, Barovia as a domain, is that premise, right? We can say that this domain is literally this theme of jealousy destroying, then we should be able to, we can see it in the, zooming in close and far away, right? Strahd at the top level is doing it, but maybe in I forget whatever the name of the village is. Is it the village of Barovia? I don't know. Whatever is in there with like the Burgermaster or Meister, and those could also be doing that same thing, which again clues the players in, right? This sort of macro and micro, what's happening. I think as the esoteric folk and the kind of ancient astronaut folk like to point out, as above, so below, right? If it's happening on this level where these NPCs are having these kind of conflicts, it might be mirrored by what's happening above. And it just adds another resonance and adds your players a way to really start thinking about the world in a way other than just tell us what the next quest is. In the chat, let's see, got a few things here. Nothing says, I don't think it's more work in the end. Once you get into having themes, helps you improv, that makes you need less prep. Yes, I would probably say right, because I do think it gives you direction. And it's not linear direction, so it's direction you can use for everything. I think one of the issues with trying to prep stuff in general is that and I made a video, I think nothing you commented on recently, so maybe you watched it not long ago, right? As I try to think of kind of what's outward radially from where the players are, so I prep a little bit around, or at least I'm thinking about it. That way I'm not shocked and surprised by the players going this way as opposed to that way, because I've got something there. If you thinking about these thematic premises, then yeah, it matters less where they're going, sure, in a physical way, what's there, what's in the terrain, but as far as what's happening, what are the forces motivating the world over there, you can tie them back in to these kind of central concepts. Let's see, Bob Mostel says, I don't think you need to reveal the entirety of the themes, but you should get some buy-in, as to say, tone, or even that there will be. Sure. Absolutely. I think you do want to make sure the party is definitely tone. I think is a big one. I think that the themes should be such that if the player's never aware of them, that it doesn't hurt their chances, and it doesn't, like, I would never have the players fail something, right, because of it, right? They're gonna fail things for their own actions, right? It wouldn't be something like, well, you didn't catch my theme, so you're out, kind of thing. But certainly, as GMs, obviously we want we want the players to pick up on the tone of the game we're playing. If I'm GMing a serious game, I want the players to take it seriously, right? I don't want them to treat it like a joke campaign. And I'm sure if I'm running a joke campaign and the players are thinking they're getting a serious campaign, that's not going to jive either. And certainly when you're injecting these ideas that may be meaningful to you, serious to you, that you could, you feel free to bring in stuff, because you can, the game can be cathartic for you. You don't need to run away from that catharsis. If there is something that you want to deal with, playing it out through a world can be a really therapeutic way of working through it. And you definitely want your players to take that seriously, right? You don't want to be saying, I'm trying to work myself through something that I think is really deep, but it is meaningful and personal to me, and you guys are playing it like a joke. Like, that's just going to make me upset, right? That's not going to be a good experience. So you definitely want to make sure that when you're doing things, especially if you're getting into sensitive areas that you want to explore, that you got the right party in the mind frame to do it. Let's see. Juan Cholo says, when it comes to one-dimensional characters, when I was a kid, my dad ran some games with a recurring villain, anti-paladin, named Sir Snively Whiplash. He would twirl his mustache while saying threats. Yeah, oh yeah. Well, Snively is a classic villain, but yeah, I mean, in the kind of cartoon world, right? It didn't matter. It was probably, I mean, in a cartoon, oftentimes, I mean, I'm talking about really kids cartoons and not sort of adult or maybe, I don't know, teen up level cartoons. I actually appreciate that they don't have two dimensions, or it, like, I think about, I don't know, does what's his name? Shoot. Well, like Yosemite Sam, right? Does Yosemite Sam have a dimension other than he just wants to get the rabbit or something, which is great, because then you can have Bugs Bunny do stuff and you don't feel bad. It's, and Elmer Fudd, they would kind of give that second dimension of he would finally get Daffy or Bugs, and then he would kill them and then suddenly feel this overwhelming grief. But that was about it. So, if you're playing with kids, like if I'm playing a game with my daughter, she's 7, probably not going to put a bunch of themes in there, unless maybe there's something I want to try to, I'm thinking, like, maybe there's a teachable moment in there, but I don't want to get into this sort of Saturday morning, TV special where here's the special on, don't talk to strangers. So that's what my game's going to be about. But, see, Bob Monson says, otherwise, if you as a DM would like to explore, say, love conquers all as a theme, and you have players that want a theme of how many Monty Python quotes we cram in, there will be tears. Yes, that's pretty much what I was saying before, right? You want to be, definitely tonally, you want to be in the same area. Frederick Wart just got internet back. Oh, well, sorry about that. Glad you got your internet back just to catch. We're sort of wrapping things up, but there's a lot of good stuff in the chat that I'm trying to read through, so glad you made it for this part. So, right, I'm not saying it's ancient astronauts, but cue the picture of the guy. It's totally ancient aliens, right? It's aliens. Yeah. I should probably do a whole thing on the show, because I kind of dig the show, but only because they go to interesting places, even though it's, when I go look up stuff about these interesting places they go, it's almost never what they claim it is on the show. But still, I have found about locations on the earth that are interesting that I didn't know about before, because of that show. Let's see. Jack Hole says, it might be hard not to come off as preachy while implementing themes. I'll be careful. Otherwise, you might as well give the G.I. Joe PSA afterwards. Right. So that's kind of the thing is, right? These things should be subtle. These things you're exploring over the range of a campaign. This is not something that you get to the end of a session and then, you have the barmaid or the tavern keeper or the shopkeeper turn to the players and say, remember now, players, never do this, right? It should be something that is enriching, right? It isn't something you're beating things over the head with, right? It's something that is enriching, but I think that exploring these things as a GM enriches my experience GMing, my experience world building. And I think that to the extent that your players get involved in them, I think it will be enriching for them. But it's kind of like when you watch a really good movie, right? You don't necessarily, or even, I definitely did this with Looney Tunes. I love Looney Tunes as a kid. Obviously with the caveat of some of the stuff that hasn't aged well in Looney Tunes now, but you catch all kinds of jokes you didn't catch as a kid. It was funny to you as a kid. It's funny to you now, but it's funny in a little bit differently, because now you might catch some of the more subtle things that they were doing, or just things that you could not have got as a kid. When my daughter sees like, there's that cartoon where I forget what it is. Like the like Bugs Bunny is the artist, and he's just messing around with Daffy. And at one point, he paints Daffy as like a jackass, but he kind of does it in a way that it kind of spells out jackass without actually saying he's a jackass. It might have been something else, something like that, right? My daughter doesn't get that part. To her, it's just funny because now he's dressed like a donkey, kind of thing. But she doesn't get that other part of the joke, right? I get it. So it is enriched. And I know those cartoons were really for as much adults as kids back in the day. But it's that kind of thing that, right, it enriches even me getting that joke now makes it more funny. But not getting that aspect of it doesn't make it less funny for my daughter. Just she'll get older. If she watches it again, she will, she'll get more out of it. Frederick Work says on themes, I ask players to help come up with. If they dirty their hands in it, they are more likely to respect it. Yep, that's a totally fine way to do it. I really like sort of letting them kind of explore it and sort of see if they pick up on it. That's kind of that, maybe that kind of part of that me is sort of sort of my authorial aspect comes out, where I want to see, like, can they pick up on these things without me explaining it? But it works totally fine if you want to just say, here are the kind of things I want to explore. It's really as with everything, right? It's what works best for your table. It may work best for your table to make everything plain and clear, and everyone can really buy into it. Especially, I assume with these, everyone here is pretty much running kind of D&D-esque games, but there are plenty of story games out there, right? And sort of games like some of the Played by the Apocalypse games and games like that really are much more open about here's what our game is about thematically, or in these kind of premises that we're dealing with. And there's no reason why you can't put that into your game. And you might very much get your table on board of saying, hey, this is what we want to prove, right? Love conquers all, right? And then that puts the whole direction as to what your evil guys are trying to do, what the players are trying to do, right? It puts everything kind of into focus. Or you can do like what I'm kind of doing, which is kind of layering them in, sprinkling it in. And then it's one of those things that when I hear, it's kind of like when you put something in your game, maybe big, it may be small. Well, usually small, I would guess. And you don't know whether the player is going to pick up on it. You may not even really understand it yourself, but just somehow it ended in the game. And then you're listening to your players chat and they sort of pick up on it. And then either you realize, oh, they got what I was saying, or, oh, they found something that I didn't even really think about, but they found this kind of cool, resonant idea or feature or something. And you're like, oh, wow, that's neat. Like I really like those moments of player discovery. So I like to have something where I can put things for them to discover. But like I said, for me, it's not, if they don't discover this, then somehow they're, it lessens things for them. It's, to me, hopefully it's an additive aspect. Let's see. Jackal says Fate RPGs up front about themes as well. Yep. I was going to say Fate and then I didn't. So thanks for adding that in. Bob Monsell says, I think it could be productive to drag the personality traits, ideals, flaws, bonds into the creation of a theme. Absolutely. I mean, it's, it's like lots of things, right? It's however your process works. Some people might build their whole world and kind of what's in it going from that premise / theme forward. Or you could, and that will shape the entire world. Why are these kingdoms doing all these things? Everything is coming down to these handful of premises or themes that I'm working with. And that's going to set the table for everything. Or it could be, I've got the world set up and, on a campaign level. Why is this particular thing happening now with these particular players? I mean, players as in the people who are the shaping the situation, not necessarily the PCs. That's because of this, right? Or you could have all that set up and then have your players building up all this stuff about their characters. And then you're going to take all of that and put it in a soup. And you're going to pick out of the soup this thing that's going to be kind of applicable to all of them. Or you could have the themes already set up and then have your players pick their flaws, bonds, and stuff from the things that are resonant to the theme. And that could be something that's right. So we're talking about, say, love and jealousy and those things. Then maybe you put those, okay, we're going to deal with, these are going to be our flaws and things, or on our bonds are all going to be about love and jealousy, and maybe a couple other things related to that, because that's kind of the theme of this campaign. So there's kind of no wrong way to do it, really, right? It's whatever's going to be most helpful for everybody in their creative processes. Nothing says one fun thing about themes in RPGs is that your PCs can fail. Right. I mean, that's kind of the idea, in the idea of the play is that through writing the play or write book or movie or whatever, is you're making that proof to the audience. By the end of this play, have I proved to you, in a sense, what I was trying to say? If I said at the beginning with this hypothesis of love conquers all, at the end of this thing, did I prove to you that yes, indeed, love conquers all? With your players, it's great because they're going through the whole thing. So at the end of the campaign, you could be like, okay, what happened in the campaign? Did love really conquer all? Was that successful or did it fail? And you've kind of gone through it, and through the events being shaped by everything comes along. At the end of it, that's something you could say about it, which to me is a lot cooler than just, well, we killed the bad guy and threw him in a vat of acid at the end. Okay, but I like I've said before, like I don't remember most of the campaigns much about them that I played in. I mean, just time passes, things come and go. What I remember are sort of moments, and what I would say by a moment is something that resonates. And I think having these themes, having these kind of premises that work, introduces more things that resonate. Lowell, Vapor Maven. Hello, Lowell. I'm at work now, but got to be in the store now. Oh, well, great. Well, don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble on my behalf, Lowell. But hey, thanks for tuning in. Oh, it's Tank Pal. This is your work account. Okay, hey, Tank Pal. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Well, sure. Lowell Vapor Maven. I'm not even sure what to make of that, but hey, glad you could tune in at work. I think I'm probably wrapping things up at this point. So unfortunately, you're only catching the tail end. Obviously, this will be up on the tubes, and then probably tomorrow I'll have up in podcast form if you prefer to listen to it rather than watch it. Anybody have any last? I really have really enjoyed the comments, and I think folks have really added a lot to the conversation. So I appreciate everybody who's hung out. I always hate it because I feel like my streams are always ending, and they have a lot more people than when I started. And I feel like that just means, yes, please, everybody in the chat, and everybody who will be in the chat now and in the future, please like this. If for some reason you're in here listening to this and it doesn't sound like utter nonsense to you, subscribing would be nice. Helps me out with the YouTube stuff a lot. Maybe we could do like a workshopping. I think I have a number of things I want to do, kind of workshopping kind of stuff. And I definitely want to go back to that Von Richten's guide and use the tables to kind of work up some sort of bad guys. And maybe now that I've done this stream, kind of thinking about some of these animating principles or themes or premises, maybe one day we'll do those. I don't have it in electronic form, but I just have the book, so maybe figure out, or just kind of put stuff, sort of whiteboard stuff I'm going along, might be a fun thing to do. Here's my cat Betty about to lick my book. No, you cannot lick the book, Betty. Thank you. I got to get a cat cam because I'm right next to my bed, which is right off camera, and both cats tend to be around me. I'd like to be able to just take the heat off me for a second. I could just switch to cat cam. Switch to cat cam for a moment. Maybe the next iteration of things, I'll have a cat cam set up. They're both here. Both cats are looking at me. Thanks. Hey, troll fan. I appreciate you being a longtime subscriber. Thanks. I don't get a lot of metrics out of YouTube, and one of the things I don't get is I have no idea. Like one, the roller coaster of subscribers is awful, and I lose a couple of subscribers, and even though I've got I'm monetized now, and thank you everybody who's allowed me to get that far, over 1,000, and now I think I'm at like over 1,100, which is amazing. But I'm not near big enough where I don't notice if a couple of people join. That great feeling of, ooh, some people joined, and then four. I think over the weekend, like 4 people unsubscribed, and then like 4 people turn around and subscribe pretty quickly. I don't know if it's the same people just turned around and came back or what happened, but man, the emotional roller coaster, it's frustrating. But one of the things is you don't get any sense. Like I have no idea. Somebody subscribed. Somebody could have been subscribed to me, been my first subscriber since I started the channel. I have no idea who they are. If no one steps forward and claims it, I don't know, which is unfortunate. They don't have, I guess ultimately I'm saying I have now the community tab, which I've enjoyed interfacing with folks on. right? And there's channel memberships if you want to join the channel that way. And it's, you pay a little bit of money. It just helps support me getting materials and paying for things that right now, if I'm just paying out of pocket. Because these videos, as far as on the monetization angle, I'm making like fractions of pennies on things. But every little bit helps. But I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to pitch anything, but just that they don't have a lot of features for me to be able to see everybody who's subscribed. I'll get something like, if somebody has, I think, a channel on YouTube. Nobody, you can't sit on my lap right now, has a channel on YouTube. I'll usually get a notification if so-and-so joined the channel, subscribe, but not always. Other than that, I guess if you're just an individual who isn't set up with a channel, like I don't really get anything other than I got a subscription kind of thing. So I have no idea how long people have been around or what they're doing. And that's kind of why I'm thinking about moving to Discord for some stuff, is just because I can do more there. It's got a little bit more options on the community front than YouTube has. And I want to trying to consolidate where I do my messaging, and I'll probably do the community tab, because it seems like that gets a fair amount of eyeballs of folks who on the channel, I think. People can let me know. Bob Mosel says, what number does vesting end at? I'm not sure I understand the question, Bob Mosel. Can you rephrase or give me some more? Am I missing? I'm not sure I get it, but I'm glad that some folks have hung with me for a long time. Hopefully as the content has evolved somewhat, it's been something. That's the other thing I don't know, right? I can only look at the numbers, right? If I post something, sometimes I'm going to post things because I want to talk about them. And if folks decide that that's the last straw and they're going to unsubscribe, then I just live with it, because I want to talk about it. And I don't want to be someone who's driven solely by what I think will not annoy or keep the most people happy. I mean, if it's something that's meaningful to me, right? If folks don't want to hear about me playing Candyland with my daughter, I'm not going to talk about it. But if it's something that I think is important to me, I'm going to talk about it. Oh, I see. In startup companies, you could say employee number 14 and still get in the big stock payouts. Yeah. I think the key here is there are any stock payouts. I wish they could do something. If they could do something, if I could sell shares to folks in some way and make it sort of crowd community. I mean, I guess that's what all the stuff is, right? Community funding, but I would love to do it in a way where it's kind of like the community owned, as opposed to just community financed, right? Maybe I should look at it. That's a good idea. But unfortunately, like YouTube, like I was saying, YouTube doesn't give me any kind of real insight into a lot of that. So, Troll Fan, I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Hopefully it's been worth your while. Otherwise, I welcome everybody who's new. And obviously, I see names popping up on the stream repeatedly. So I know you guys are hanging out, and that's great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully it was useful to folks. And of course, hopefully when people are just listening to this or watching this later, they will also find it useful. I'm on Twitter. I'll post my Twitter thing again. I don't really understand Twitter as far as in this incarnation goes, because I'm up at over 1,100 subscribers on YouTube, which I feel like subscribing is on YouTube is a bigger barrier. I would have thought that getting Twitter followers would be a lower bar than YouTube followers, but I've found it the reverse. So I've got about less than 700 Twitter followers, and I don't quite know, but feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I have a subreddit, but I've gotten out of the habit because I feel like I'm just spread too thin with posting updates to Reddit. So I got to get back in the habit of posting my updates to Reddit. Like I've got Patreon, I've got a coffee. And what happens is I'm just spreading myself around trying to cover all these bases of stuff, and it's a lot to manage. So part of why I'm thinking of doing some kind of Discord is to hopefully at least get folks. I know there are integrations between Discord and Patreon, so I can get my Patreon subscribers kind of on the Discord and, reward them with some different, statuses and whatnot, and be able to feed information there. As far as I know, again, YouTube, I don't think they have any integrations with anything, so I would have to manually do something, but that's okay. But then I could have something. And anyway, these are all, I don't know, I'm just rambling about kind of things, but, Trollfan says, really enjoyed your post-mortem game session stuff. Helps me develop as a game master. Oh, I'm glad you enjoy them. And these comments, people might not think that these comments, and whether it's in the chat or in the comments of YouTube or elsewhere, I don't know if people feel like that they are meaningless, but they really do help me a lot, because especially at the beginning, it's gotten a little bit easier now, because I think I was telling Terrence this, but I feel like I hit a point where people were kind of paying, or some people were watching, obviously some people were watching, but mostly just silently. And then I turned some corner, or I went up somewhere where I was getting more people who were interacting actively. And that really helps me, and I'm sure it helps lots of other creators. So I would definitely say, if you're following a bunch of people on YouTube, leave them comments, or elsewhere. It doesn't have to be just YouTube. Leave comments, leave questions, leave whatever, because obviously we see it and it helps guide what we want to do, right? I know that people really, that one of the things that folks, to the extent that I'm known at all, a lot of it's through, hex crawling stuff. So I try to periodically go back to hex crawling topics, but sometimes I just don't know what to talk about with hex crawling, not because I have nothing to say, but because I'm not sure, right? And then someone will send me a question, and so in that question, I'm like, bam, now I've got something to talk about. Now I know exactly what my next hex crawl video is going to be, because now I have something that clearly I didn't cover, or maybe I didn't cover well enough, or whatever. Like, okay, I have something to go on, right? Or if folks like this kind of stream format, I like it, and I appreciate that I've had the time to do it recently, and knock on particle board here that I will continue to have these kinds of things after I'm fully onboarded into my new job, that I'll still be able to take out an hour or so to hang out, right? That I can do that. But if other folks like the smaller videos, because right now I'm pushing an hour and a half almost, and I know folks like the shorter stuff. So with some stuff, I'm able to cut up the streams into shorter pieces of material. But I will go back and do focused, shorter, just standalone videos. And obviously, if I don't stream as much, I will probably do more of those. And if I can stream more, I will stream, and maybe some stuff in between. But so the more that I can hear from you, and you feel open to talking to me, and that we can facilitate that, then I could try to feed into what folks really like. Because I have a lot of things I like, but I don't always feel like this is the best platform for it, because folks aren't interested in hearing those things from me, right? So please keep in touch. Let me know what you like. Let me know what's working for you. Let me know if there's something that's come up that you want to hear me talk about. Or, like I said, with these chats, what I like about it is it really becomes a conversation. It's not just me jabbering at at a little electronic eye that's staring back at me like a tiny little HAL from 2001. So I appreciate all that stuff. And yes, please, if you're not subscribed, why not subscribe? It doesn't really hurt you much. You'll get notified when I go live, that kind of stuff. Boost me up a little bit in the YouTube stuff, so I just get that people who potentially are interested in my videos will see my videos more. Hopefully that becomes a wonderful, spiral upwards, and just gets a little more attention, or lets me do stuff like, like when I reach out. I mean, look, there's the part of me that says, hey, well, the more views I get, the more notice I get, the more ad revenues I get now that I'm monetized. Maybe I can start making something where I can actually look at my wife and say, see, besides all these other factors, like, look, you may not understand anything about the stuff that I'm talking about, and she really doesn't understand much, but like you can see, it is actually helping our bottom line. But beyond that, when I talk to people and I say, hey, I'd love to interview you or something, there's more of a chance that they've actually heard of me. Though I've had pretty good luck with folks, at least somewhat having some idea who I am. So, all this stuff helps. But I have been rambling on long enough. It's been well over an hour. Thanks everybody for hanging in there with me. Like, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies. But most of all, have a great rest of your day. Hopefully this was useful information to you. Please, if you got more comments and conversation stuff, throw it in the comments when this ends up on YouTube, and we can continue chatting it out. And if there's enough stuff to continue on, maybe we can do more about it. Let me know if this idea of workshopping some big bad evil guys and maybe their domains using some of these ideas and some ideas from that von Richten's guide and maybe some ideas from elsewhere will be something that you'd like to take part in and hang out with me while I do. And we can do that, but I'm going to let you go. So have a great rest of your night, day, weekend, whenever you're watching, listen to this. Game on.